Content warning. This video deals with mature subjects, such as those listed on screen. Viewer discretion is advised. How did we get here? Really? Only a few years prior, nobody would have ever thought Green Day would have been capable of capturing the zeitgeist like this ever again. So let's rewind back. As to fully understand how Green Day managed to pull off the career comeback of the decade, we need to start at the very beginning. October 3rd, 2000 saw the international release of Green Day's sixth studio album, Warning. A sonic departure from their signature sound, Warning saw Green Day move in a more folk rock direction, incorporating more acoustic guitars into many tracks, potentially in response to the massive success of Good Riddance. Despite the efforts of singles such as the title track, Waiting, and Minority, Warning received a lukewarm critical reception, and quite the backlash from diehard fans who thought that Green Day had gone soft, which only further cemented the growing sentiment that they had become old news. Blink-182's Enema of the State released just the year before, and completely flipped pop-punk on its head. All of a sudden, a bunch of new kids were now either hitting the scene or just about to, thinking they had it in them to be the next Blink. Meanwhile, the bands that had ushered in punk rock's mainstream success in the mid-90s were now in steep decline, and Green Day were no different. Not only had Green Day's own genre transformed, but the entire musical landscape around them had too. 2000 saw the continued dominance of nu metal, with the pinnacle of the genre, Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory, releasing just 3 weeks after Warning, as well as the post-grunge movement really starting to take off. But arguably the most detrimental factor was that Warning released during the golden age of music piracy. Sites such as Napster, LimeWire, and later Kazaa would forever alter the way music is consumed, something we're still feeling the effects of to this day. Warning itself would even leak on Napster a month before the album was released. The sharing of MP3 files online affected album sales across the board, since why would you purchase an album when you could just download the songs on it for free? Regardless, all of these factors in some way contributed to Warning being a commercial flop. While looked back on fondly by fans these days, having earned a reputation as being so underrated that r/Green Day even has a bot counting the number of days since someone has called it underrated, Warning upon its release was seen as a bit of a blunder, as it signaled that the band might be moving in a softer direction. Speaking on the album's initial reception, lead singer and guitarist Billy Joe Armstrong would state, quote, "After Warning, well, we love that record. It was sort of a divisive record, because it was sort of this folk Americana thing that we were doing. And at that time, there were also all these new pop-punk bands that were popping up, and we went in the opposite direction." All Green Day could do now was lick their wounds and venture into the vast unknown of the 21st century. And while new material would need to be released at some point, the goal for now was to keep themselves from falling into complete irrelevancy, something they were well aware they needed to do even before Warning's release, as Green Day performed at the Vans Warped Tour the preceding summer, something even other bands performing noted as a publicity move. But following the album was the obligatory press tour and live shows, the first show of which was that November in Toronto, Ontario. However, something else important would occur that November, something with much wider implications. In 2000, the United States was gearing up to go to the polls once again. Coming off of the relatively stable, albeit not scandal-free, two-term administration of Bill Clinton, the American people would now vote for the president who would guide the country into the 21st century, with the incumbent Democratic Party selecting Clinton's own vice president, Al Gore, as their candidate with minimal contest. The Republican Party's primaries were a little more competitive, but it was ultimately Texas Governor George W. Bush, son of former President George H.W. Bush, who won the nomination. The election itself took place on November 7th and was one of the closest U.S. presidential elections in history, with it all coming down to whichever candidate won the state of Florida. For a while, it was too close to call, but after a final count, Bush had an ever so slight lead, so small that a state-mandated recount was needed. As more and more ballots were recounted, protests erupted in the streets, and the two candidates would even take each other to court over the recounts. But as December began, the Supreme Court ruled 7-2 to end the recounts, citing poor oversight and counting standards. At the time of the court order, Bush was in the lead. He had won. The 2000 election would not only be the craziest finale to an election season until 2020, but would also prove crucial, as even if nobody knew at the time, the actions taken by the leaders the American people elected that November would prove instrumental in shaping the geopolitical landscape the world would face in the coming decades. And its first test would come less than a year later. 2001 was a massive year, but for Green Day, it would be a year largely defined by touring. playing a variety of cities across the United States from the beginning to late summer of that year. Even factoring in their declining popularity, Green Day still managed to play sold-out shows. While the tour was quite the success, the lack of buzz surrounding Warning did little to attract new listeners. On the more fortunate side of things, Green Day managed to sweep the awards at the California Music Awards, winning Outstanding Group, Punk Rock/Ska Album, Artist of the Year, and many more. Despite all the touring and talk show performances, Green Day still felt compelled to put out something to keep from falling into complete irrelevance, or at least as an excuse to keep touring for a little longer. Sure, nu metal was still kicking, even if its own popularity was beginning to wane, and post-grunge would have one hell of a year in its own right, but 2001 saw the beginning of both the garage rock and post-punk revivals, spearheaded by the release of the Strokes' debut album, Is This It?, which triggered a massive shakeup in the music landscape, as countless bands would come out of the woodwork over the next 3 to 5 years, all with a similar sound to the New York City Quintet. While Is This It had a staggered release worldwide, with Australia getting it first, because of course they did, the album wouldn't be released in the US until September 2001. I don't think I need to discuss the events that transpired the morning of September 11th, 2001. I doubt anyone watching is even slightly unaware of what unfolded that fateful morning. Within less than 24 hours, the world was forever changed. The hope and optimism that the 90s were defined by was gone in an instant, and in its place was fear and paranoia. Nearly every aspect of life was affected, everything from heightened airport security to certain music not being played on the radio stations. But in the face of this tragedy, America would come together to go after the group that orchestrated the attacks. Following the Taliban government of Afghanistan's refusal to hand over al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden, on October 7th, the US-led coalition would begin its invasion of Afghanistan, thus kicking off what then President Bush would dub the War on Terrorism, as well as a nearly 20-year-long war in Afghanistan. Zooming out from geopolitics, Green Day wouldn't exit 2001 without a few releases, such as their first, second, third, fourth live EP, Tune in Tokyo. None of the songs on the EP were played in Tokyo. It was released only in Japan on October 9th and did quite well over there for a live release, peaking at number 29 on the Japanese charts, but don't worry, it eventually made its way stateside for Black Friday 2014. Only a couple days after the EP's release, Green Day began uploading phone messages on their official website and message board as a way to directly communicate with fans, which, even taking into account that this was a pre-social media era, I find to be quite a vulnerable thing for the band to do. The first pair was uploaded on October 15th, and in it, Billy Joe touched upon the beginning of the war in Afghanistan.
Hello, everyone out there. This is Billy Joe from the band Green Day. This is our first message that I'm going to be posting or speaking of. Anyways, it's actually a question. How do you feel about the U.S. military bombing Afghanistan? If you get this, please write your opinion on our message board. Thanks again, and I hope to get you another message soon.
But more importantly, at least for the band, Armstrong would confirm that they had begun writing new songs for a 7th studio album. What this would look like, not even the band knew, even if they uploaded some teasers via the phone messages. But regardless, something was on the horizon, and following the mixed response to Warning, Green Day felt like it was time to go back to basics. While a few songs veered into the more folk sound of Warning, the overall goal was to reestablish their punk roots, and it just so happens that their next major release would literally be a compendium of their history. International Superhits was Green Day's first greatest hits compilation, released on November 13th, 2001, just in time for the holiday season. Alongside it also came International Super Videos, a collection of almost every Green Day music video up until that point, released on both DVD and VHS. The compilation record contained nearly every single released from Dookie to Warning, Jar from the Angus soundtrack, as well as 2 brand new songs, Maria and Pop Rocks and Coke. Bassist Mike Dirnt would comment on the release of the compilation, quote, "When we had put out International Super Hits, that was kind of like staking our flag in the ground and saying, okay, this is a mile marker, where do we go from here?" For the remainder of the year, Green Day would mainly lay low, as the next year would be just as, if not more, jam-packed than the last. Heading into 2002, things on the outside seemed relatively quiet, but behind the scenes, something big was being planned. But until then, Green Day was mainly still in the studio at the start of the year, demoing new material and practicing every day. Eventually, as was tradition for them, they put up a list of songs on the wall of their jam space for tracks that were in consideration for the next album. But again, these were still early stages. That March, Mike's side project The Frustrators would release their second album, Achtung Jackass, on Billy Joe's own record label, Adeline Records. Less than 2 weeks later, Green Day was out playing in New York at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony for the legendary band The Ramones. But then it was back on the road. First for a few standalone shows in Japan, but then a much larger event. One that would really test if Green Day still had what it took to make an impact. And what was that? The Pop Disaster Tour, baby! A co-headline tour lasting from April to June featuring Green Day and Blink-182, the two punk rock heavyweights touring for the first time together would make stops all around the US and would be a massive success. The tour helped introduce them to a new audience of Blink listeners and also kept the band on people's minds, even if it was in large part because Blink was at their peak popularity. While there was no major rivalry between the bands as many perceived, an undeniable bitterness existed within the members of Green Day towards the success of Blink-182. Mike Dirnt would even remark, quote, "I was really happy for them, but now I find it a little irritating. I think they trivialize what we do and punk rock in general. It's like throwing shit in the face of someone who had substance at one point." Drummer Trey Cool would even make some comments that got under the skin of Blink's guitarist and co-lead singer Tom DeLonge. Well, I doubt any of these comments were personal, as over time Green Day would mellow out towards Blink. That envy they felt was still real, as bands like Blink were sprinting through a door that Green Day had opened for them. Looking back on it, Trey Cool would state, quote, "The tour felt good, but now what? We've proven that we're the kings of this genre that we don't want to be stuck in. How do we get out of that?" Once the Pop Disaster Tour concluded, Green Day would make a couple of arena appearances in the UK that July, and on July 2nd, their B-Sides and Rarities compilation, Shenanigans, released, which compiled, almost, all of the band's bonus tracks from throughout the years. The compilation was a modest success for a B-Sides record, and is looked back on quite fondly by fans, but for many at the time, it seemed that things could potentially be winding down for the band. They'd been declining for quite some time, and now with both a Greatest Hits and B-Sides compilation out, where was left for them to go? Band practice even at the time was wrought with unproductivity and borderline infighting, culminating in Armstrong phoning Dirnt sometime after the tour to ask him a question that would decide the fate of Green Day moving forwards. "Do you even want to still do this anymore?" To which Dirnt responded, "I don't know. I'm watching you go ape shit every day." After the US-led invasion in late 2001, the Taliban's rule over Afghanistan crumbled in a matter of weeks, with an interim government being set up under the watchful eye of the United Nations. However, during the fighting, bin Laden managed to escape to neighboring Pakistan, where he would hide out until his final days. While 2002 focused on propping up the new Afghan government, violence dominated the region, as despite losing power in the country, the Taliban would begin an insurgency. But by late 2002, the American government began eyeing up other Middle Eastern countries to expand the war on terror. Specifically the nation of Iraq. Helmed by the brutal dictator Saddam Hussein, the US had previously come to blows with Iraq during the Persian Gulf War in the early 90s. But now with the war on terror in full swing, American leadership saw an opportunity. Even in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, many within the Bush administration, such as Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld and Vice President Dick Cheney, sought to link Hussein to the attacks. Although there were no connections between Iraq and 9/11, American leadership repeatedly advocated for military action against the country, claiming the Hussein regime was aiding terrorist organizations and amassing weapons of mass destruction. Congress then passed the Authorization of Use of Military Force Against Iraq resolution in 2002, allowing the president to send troops into Iraq to topple the Hussein regime if diplomacy failed. Despite no WMDs being found and the countless weapons inspections conducted, tensions still lingered, as it seemed the US would be going to war with Iraq regardless, even if many felt it was unjust.
It was just over 90 minutes beyond President Bush's deadline for Saddam Hussein to leave Iraq.
On March 20th, 2003, the United States began its invasion of Iraq, with a surprise bombing campaign carried out over the capital city of Baghdad, following Saddam Hussein's refusal to leave the country. Despite major pushback to a military invasion by everyone from average Americans to the Pope, the US went ahead with the undeclared war. While the Iraqis put up a fight, many chose not to resist the invading forces, as the invasion phase would conclude on April 30th with the fall of Baghdad and Hussein going on the run. But despite George Bush's now infamous mission accomplished speech the following day, this war had only just begun. 2003 would be a year of change, but at the start, change seemed like a distant pipe dream for Green Day. Probably because Billy got a DUI. The band were stuck in the studio making an album that deep down they knew was not their best work. Cool and Dirnt viewed Armstrong as dictatorial, while Armstrong himself was afraid of showing the others new material. Dirnt stated to Rolling Stone, quote, "Breaking up was an option. We were arguing a lot and we were miserable. We needed to shift directions." Nevertheless, the band started having weekly meetings to try and work out their interpersonal conflicts, as well as whittling down the countless songs written and recorded over the past 2 to 3 years for an album set to release that fall. An album that would be titled Cigarettes and Valentines. By May, Armstrong revealed in a phone message that...
Anyways, as for our album, we have about 40 songs finished. About 6 of them I like, the rest aren't as good, which can be frustrating. At the same time, I'm not going to release a record I feel lukewarm about. I want to wait until we have something we're 1,000% passionate about.
June would come around, Trey would get knee surgery, and divorced again, and the guys would keep on recording. But what happened next is a little murky, but proved to be a pivotal turning point for the band. From what I've pieced together, this is what I think most likely happened. In the summer of 2003, Green Day presented the album to their longtime producer, Rob Cavallo. He liked it, but something inside the producer told him that what the band had put together wasn't the best they could do. Needing a second opinion, he showed the album to Tom Whaley, chairman and CEO of Warner Brothers Records, who agreed with Cavallo and called a meeting with the band a few days later, where he stated that they'd be willing to release Cigarettes and Valentines, but were not willing to put in the money to market the album as they didn't think it was the best Green Day had to offer. With Cavallo expressing that he agreed with his boss, Armstrong agreed to reconsider. Mysteriously around this time, the nearly completed masters vanished from the studio. Speaking on the disappearance of Cigarettes and Valentines, Armstrong stated, quote, "It was theft, we think, because the hard drive was gone. It was such a bummer and we were so traumatized by it. We either have to re-record this or just scrap it and start over again." Who took it and where it went, nobody knows. But with both pushback from management and the masters going missing, Green Day now fully realized they needed to change directions, even if backups were made. Though aspects of a handful of songs would be recycled for new material. Or maybe they made the entire story up and the album never existed. Yeah, one thing you need to understand about Cigarettes and Valentines is that no one knows with 100% certainty what actually happened to the album. The story I put together is just what I think is the most likely course of events given what little the band and those close to them have said, especially after the comments made by Rob Cavallo in the American Idiot 20th Anniversary box set's booklet. Cavallo himself never outright said that the album was stolen, just scrapped. However, the band to this day still claims it was stolen, even if they've remained cagey about what was on it, leading countless fans to speculate as to what this album might have been, including myself back in 2023. Yeah, that's right, I went this whole time not mentioning that I've talked about Cigarettes and Valentines before. Maybe go check that one out if you're interested, even if it's not my best video. The Sam's Town video is my best video. If not for the fact that I really don't know what to believe about this album anymore, from what I've gathered, this is my stance on things nowadays. I don't think the album being stolen is too far outside the realm of possibility, given what's been said, but I doubt it was stolen by some random crackhead busting into the studio at the middle of the night and swiping the hard drives. If that was the case, the album would have 100% leaked online. What I think they mean by it being stolen is maybe an executive from Warner Brothers took it, only for it to be put in the vault without Green Day knowing. So, in a way, it being both scrapped and stolen would be true. But then again, there is no way to know for sure. Regardless of the true nature of events, Green Day was now fully committed to changing directions. But not before they got a little wacky. The Network is, or was, a new wave side project of Green Day's featuring their touring guitarist Jason White and 2 other individuals. But they're totally not Green Day in disguise or anything, no. They're a completely different band who were brought together to fulfill an ancient prophecy and spread the gospel of the Church of Lushitology. I just so happen to be a non-practicing member. I come from a long lineage of them, actually. Drink up, motherfuckers. Jokes aside, the network released their first studio album, Money Money 2020, in 2003 on Adeline Records, with both bands even feuding with one another.
Hey everybody, what's up? This is Billy Joe. Just wanted to talk about the rumors and the bullshit that's been going on lately. All I gotta say is fuck the network. Those guys are totally spreading rumors. I try to do those guys a favor by bringing them to this country and putting out their record, and this is how I get repaid, by talking shit about my band. Unfortunately, there's a contract and I have to put out their record. So the only thing I could say is fuck you, network. Bring it on with Umwalks.
Even if it was practically an open secret that the two were one and the same. Dirnt remarked in Spin magazine, quote, "We became so fucking creative, we probably could have written a whole record in a day. It's arguable that some records were written in a day. No Green Day records, of course. They even made a concert film released the following year on DVD titled Disease is Punishment, directed by indie filmmaker John Roker. Roker had known Green Day for quite some time. At the time, the filmmaker was starting work on a stop-motion film, Live Freaky, Die Freaky, which Billy Joe would star in. On a phone call one day, Roker would discuss his plans for the film, while Armstrong would admit that Green Day was embarking on a new project, to which Roker suggested they document the process. Initially apprehensive, Armstrong agreed to let Roker film the making of this next album, spending 9 months with the band. As to what this album would entail, well, earlier in 2003, Dirnt was alone in the studio one day and decided to write a 30-second song. Armstrong, liking the idea, wrote a 30-second song of his own, to which Cool wrote a song also. Each member slowly wrote more and more, until those fragments were combined into the sprawling 9-minute epic, Homecoming. However, a clear creative vision for the album wouldn't begin to coalesce until Billy Joe was out for a drive. While cruising the California streets, the song That's How I Like It by Leonard Skinner came on the radio. Hearing it on the way to the studio, Armstrong grew mildly infuriated with its lyrical content, stating, quote, "It was like, I'm proud to be a redneck," and I was like, oh my god, why would you be proud of something like this? This is exactly what I'm against. This was a tipping point. After witnessing unjust warfare be broadcast across America as if it were reality television, one he and his fellow bandmates had been outspoken in their opposition to, he knew he needed to say something. So when he got in the studio, he did what he always did. He wrote a song. When Billy wrote American Idiot, it was like no looking back at those other songs anymore. That was it. It was a totally different bar. The song American Idiot changed everything for Green Day. Once it was written, the creative juices didn't just start flowing again, they burst through the dam that had been constructed over years of tension. Looking back, Armstrong commented, quote, "For the first time, we separated from our pasts, from how we were supposed to behave as Green Day. For the first time, we fully accepted the fact that we're rock stars. Not to sound arrogant, but it was like, hey, you're only on this earth once, so you might as well enjoy it." Finally, the band was having fun in the studio again. In between writing songs, they'd drink, drive around on go-karts, drink some more, get into mischief, party where they'd have a few drinks, and even set up a pirate radio station. Now motivated with a political bite, Green Day spent the rest of 2003 writing and demoing new songs. Rob Cavallo would return to produce the album, titled American Idiot, and he would actively encourage the band to commit to the idea of making the album a rock opera. As songs were written and demoed, Armstrong needed to clear his head, deciding to fly out to New York City for a few weeks alone. Renting out a loft in Lower Manhattan, he spent time socializing and jamming with other musicians in the area. But what he spent a good chunk of his time doing was simply walking through the streets of the city, even seeing the remains of Ground Zero. The feelings of isolation the frontman felt during his stay in NYC would ultimately be channeled into songs, ones with a more introspective and depressing tone, while at the same time he began formulating ideas for a narrative story told throughout the album. A story about a kid who leaves his dead-end town behind to live out his dreams in the big city, only to find out that it wasn't what he wanted at all. Now all that was left for Green Day to do was put it all together. It was now 2004, and nu metal was dead. But its place was now taken by a subgenre that had been steadily rising in popularity for the past 2 years. Emo. Aside from nobody exactly knowing what the genre is or what bands are or aren't emo, the subgenre had been gaining more and more steam throughout the early 2000s and would go on to become one of the defining musical movements of the decade. And while Green Day are not an emo band, I think the resurgence of the subgenre would certainly play a role in their comeback, especially due to its ties to punk rock. But more on that a little later. Green Day officially began production of the album on February 17th, 2004, which just so happened to be Billie Joe Armstrong's 32nd birthday. Entering Ocean Way Studio in Hollywood, California, with producer Rob Cavallo, sound engineer Doug McKean, and filmmaker John Roker to capture it all on camera. The studio caught on fire day one. Thankfully, it was contained and there were no major damages or injuries. The process of recording the album went off without any major hiccups, even if at times Armstrong felt afraid and uncertain at not only the workload but how people would react to the whole punk rock opera concept. However, Cavallo would convince the frontman not to fear failure and embrace the idea. To help lock in their creative vision, the band recorded each song on the album in the order of its track listing. Speaking on the idea of a rock opera, Dirnt said, quote, "It's funny because we say opera, punk rock opera. People think Pavarotti, they think strings, a lot of melodies, all this other stuff. But really, it's almost like playing a Ramones set. No breaks. It's like shifting gears 5 times and playing 5 different rock songs." In the midst of recording, Green Day enlisted Chris Bellheimer, the designer of many of the band's album covers, to design the cover for American Idiot. When talking about their vision for the cover, the band was adamant that they did not want a picture of George Bush as the cover. Instead, they sought for the artwork to reflect the music and to be a bold symbol. With this in mind, Bellheimer got to work designing a cover. Taking direct inspiration from the work of Saul Bass, particularly the movie poster The Man with the Golden Arm, Bellheimer drew up the now iconic cover. A raised, bloodied left hand grasping a red heart-shaped hand grenade, with the band's name and the album title in bold text on the left-hand side. The album cover would become one of the most iconic in not just Green Day's discography, but arguably of all time. There's probably some people out there who, despite not being able to name a single Green Day song, would still be able to tell you that that logo means Green Day. By March, the band was winding down recording. In the background of the footage shot by John Roker, Billie Joe sheds a few tears while Mike lays down the final bass riffs of the closing song, What's Her Name? The recording of that song in particular was quite emotional for everyone, not just the frontman. Setting aside the song's subject matter, this was it. After months spent writing, recording, crafting a storyline, and literally having scrapped an entire album's worth of material, it was over. And if it didn't succeed, it very well may be their last hurrah. Armstrong later admitted, quote, "I really feel delirious about this album, like we're really peaking right now." Once summer arrived, Green Day were ready to go perform live again. And on July 29th, 2004, the band debuted the songs American Idiot and Jesus of Suburbia for the first time at the Grand Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles, California. 8 days later, on August 6th, the lead single for the album would drop, and things would never be the same. The song would forever alter Green Day. What American Idiot and later Boulevard of Broken Dreams did for millennials is what Longview and Basket Case did for Gen X. Green Day had successfully shaken off the label of elder statesmen with just one song, showing the world that they still had the raw energy that many thought was long gone. The song would not only be received well, but would be the commercial comeback that Green Day hoped for. It even cracked the Billboard Hot 100 in addition to the rock and alternative charts, being their first song to do so. The band's image would also see a drastic shift. That's right, everybody. Time to bust out the black eyeliner. This is Sharpie. Again, Green Day aren't an emo band, but the black outfits, dyed hair, eyeliner, and red highlights all served to signal not just a shift, but a full-on rebirth of who Green Day were for a new era. And while the flagship single was the shot in the arm the band needed, the album still needed to stick the landing. There still was a chance that all the hard work, all the momentum, could be for nothing. American Idiot was released on September 21st, 2004, 10 days after the 3rd anniversary of 9/11, and ahead of that November's presidential election. And did it live up to expectations? Well, it got some of the best reviews of their career, if that means anything. Upon release, the album received widespread acclaim. Publications across the board scored the album favorably. Hell, even the ever hard-to-impress Pitchfork gave the album a 7.2, which is pretty good for their standards. That's only half a point higher than what they gave Father of All? Are you Anyway, American Idiot was not just a critical darling, but also saw commercial success the band hadn't seen since 1994's Dookie, skyrocketing to the top of the charts in several countries, becoming Green Day's first album to debut at number 1 on the Billboard 200, remaining on the charts for over 2 years and selling over 250,000 copies its first week. making it their biggest debut week of all time. Technically starting 5 days before the record's release, Green Day embarked on the mother of all victory laps, the American Idiot World Tour. Kicking off in LA, Green Day would spend the rest of the year performing at music venues and arenas across North America, playing the whole album front to back on occasion, though making room for older cuts. Joining them would be opening acts such as New Found Glory, Sugar Cult, and My Chemical Romance. Zooming out from the realm of Green Day, 2004 would be dominated by the impending election, with foreign policy being a key issue. Following Bush declaring mission accomplished in Iraq, and after Saddam Hussein's capture in December 2003, public opinion of the Iraq War began to shift, leading to it becoming more controversial than it already was. As troops remained to try and rebuild Iraq into a democratic state, they now faced a large insurgency of not only loyalist remnants, but radical Islamist groups, now with access to the weapons of the fractured state. Despite this, Bush remained decently popular, particularly within the GOP, and easily received renomination. Meanwhile, the Democrats would select Massachusetts Senator John Kerry as their candidate. The race was close heading into November 2nd, but following a videotape surfacing of Osama bin Laden taking credit for the 9/11 attacks, Bush took the lead and ultimately won the election. However, how big of a role the tape played in this is up for debate. Regardless, the US would be getting 4 more years of a Bush White House. When we were on the American Idiot Tour, we had a blast. It was just great having a really good time. But there was also this other side of it that was dead serious. We made this record and there was an immediate response. We were just figuring out how to talk about it. How do you explain to someone not only the political side of the record, but the narrative, the characters, all the emotional sides to it? 2005 would be dominated by touring and press for American Idiot, as the album's success was bolstered by the release of its second single, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, in November the previous year. But leg 2 of the American Idiot Tour would begin on January 11th in Berlin, Germany, and lasted until February 10th with a show in Glasgow, Scotland. That February, a mere 3 days after the show, was also when the 47th annual Grammy Awards were held, with Green Day having received nominations for not only the categories of Best Rock Album and Song, but Album and Record of the Year. However, Green Day would only end up taking home the award for Best Rock Album that night. But still, to take home any Grammy is an honor in and of itself. From there, it was back out on the road, traveling all the way down to the bottom of the world for their only stop in New Zealand, before heading westward to Australia. The day after their show in Perth, their third single, Holiday, was released, which proved to be yet another hit. Though not as popular as Boulevard, Holiday still dominated the charts. Armstrong would state, quote, "I think we were part of the cultural conversation. They were starting to play Holiday on pop stations, the video and the song. It was like getting away with murder." After a few shows in Japan, Green Day returned to North America for the remainder of the spring. But it was that summer when Green Day did another round of European shows that's most important, specifically the dates of June 18th and 19th. As over the course of 2 days, Green Day performed at the National Bowl in Milton Keynes, England. At the time, the country was experiencing a massive heat wave. Temperatures shot upwards of 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite the heat, tens of thousands flocked to the amphitheater on both dates, with a combined total between the two shows placing attendance near 130,000, the 2 largest performances Green Day have played in their entire career. The 2 shows would also be recorded and later released that November as their first full live album, Bullet in a Bible, released not just on CD, but DVD, Blu-ray, and PSP UMD disc. This is the most functionally useless thing I own. Green Day would also make an appearance at the Live 8 benefit concert in Berlin as a last-minute addition that July. But as 2005 drew to a close, so did the tour, with the final show being performed on December 17th in Melbourne, Australia. Heading into 2006, Green Day took things a little easier. Sure, Boulevard of Broken Dreams won Record of the Year at the Grammys, but outside of Green Day collaborating with Irish rock band U2 for a cover of The Saints Are Coming by Skids, for a performance at the Louisiana Superdome following the devastation caused by the previous year's Hurricane Katrina, by and large, the year was mostly spent writing material for a follow-up to American Idiot. The next year would largely be more of the same, aside from a working class hero cover and appearing in the Simpsons movie. But behind the scenes, something new was brewing. Billy Joe commented, quote, "We went back into 880 and we were like, let's just pick up where we left off. So one day there was all this old gear that we'd put in a circle, and instead of trying to make an extension of American Idiot, we just started jamming and got into the old garage rock we love. And that's how Foxborough Hot Tubs got started. We did Stop, Drop, and Roll in a week." Unlike the network, Green Day were open right from the get-go that the two bands were one and the same, even if they performed under aliases. The first handful of songs were released on Green Day's message boards, and all but one would be compiled on Foxborough Hot Tub's first, and so far only, album, Stop, Drop, and Roll, released on April 22nd, 2008. Fast forwarding to 2009, past the release of American Idiot's follow-up 21st Century Breakdown, American Idiot was adapted into a full-fledged stage musical, directed by Michael Mayer. He stated, quote, "I was a big fan of Green Day, and I was listening to American Idiot a lot when I was making the movie Flicka. I was driving up and down the Pacific Coast Highway, and that was the CD that was in my rental car. I listened to it day after day. I couldn't get enough of it. And it occurred to me that I was having the same kind of relationship with that album that I had had with any number of musical albums. So a light bulb went off that said this could be a rock opera that could be staged." While various rock operas and musicals influenced the album, the idea of adapting it for the stage was only jokingly toyed around with during production, with Dirnt comedically stating, quote, "I'd eventually like to see this thing done on ice." So it wouldn't come as a shock that initially Green Day, specifically Billy Joe, were a bit apprehensive. But eventually Armstrong became captivated by the prospect, helping co-author the book with Mayer and even playing the role of St. Jimmy in several performances. A live 8-piece band would even perform the backing tracks to the songs as a way to further merge live music and theater. There was also little spoken dialogue, with the lyrics filling that role. The tracklist would not only feature every song from the album, but 2 B-sides and a selection of tracks from 21st Century Breakdown. The play began with a limited preview run in Berkeley, California in late 2009, before making its way to Broadway, officially opening on April 20th, 2010, with the cast recording soundtrack releasing the same day, which also included a release of the song When It's Time, a song demoed during the American Idiot sessions, but has its roots as far back as the early 90s. A film adaptation of American Idiot was even in the works as late as 2016, but was ultimately scrapped. I don't think I can sum up the legacy of American Idiot in a succinct way. It's probably the biggest album I've talked about up until now. I could mention that the album has been certified 6 times platinum by the RIAA, and worldwide is estimated to have sold close to 16 million copies, or John Roker's documentary Heart Like a Hand Grenade, released in 2015, or that American Idiot has been in several lists of not just best rock albums of the 2000s or albums of that decade, but best albums of all time. I could mention that in honor of its 20th anniversary, Green Day not only played the album in its entirety on the Saviors Tour, but released a box set on CD and vinyl containing not just the album, but B-sides, live recordings, demos, Roker's film, and an entirely new documentary reflecting on the album. I could mention that the political aspect of it still rings true over 20 years later. But while all of that is important, I think what arguably is American Idiot's most lasting legacy is that Green Day managed to reinvent themselves. While it certainly took hardship and calculated risk-taking, I think if there's any lesson to be learned from the story of American Idiot, it's that it's okay to start over on something. As Mike Dirnt said in the 20 Years of American Idiot documentary, quote, "With work effort, inspiration, and heart, you can go a long way." American Idiot is not only my favorite Green Day album, but my favorite album of all time. Truly a masterpiece. Like most of my favorite albums, it's one that came at a very important time in my life. I remember I first heard Boulevard of Broken Dreams after I heard a snippet of it in one of those top 50 emo songs of the 2000s. Those type of videos around spring of 2021. And something about it just clicked with me. It opened the door to getting me into Green Day by checking out not only some of their bigger hits, but eventually American Idiot as a whole, the first album of theirs I'd ever listened to. I instantly fell in love with it. Not only did I love every song, but it also spoke to a lot of the pent-up frustration and angst I was feeling. I was 15 when I first listened to it, right in the middle of the pandemic. At the time, it felt like I was going up against things that were so far beyond me, and there wasn't anything I could do to make a change. American Idiot reflected a lot of these emotions, and in a way made me feel a little less crazy for having them. Even after the fact, I still find myself connecting with the album's themes and narrative. Speaking of which, why don't we take a look into the songs and explore the story that American Idiot tells. The album starts off with the title track. It wastes no time at all throwing the listener right into what the album is all about, with scathing criticism of modern American culture and the socio-political climate of the post-9/11 era. The iconic opening line of the song,
"Don't wanna be an American idiot."
While taken by some to be a direct call out to President Bush, I think is supposed to be a more broad call to action against the chaos of the media and the lies of the political establishment, as supported by the following lines of the first verse. Speaking on the political aspect of the album, Trey Cool commented, quote, "American Idiot is a political record, but it taps into the personal aspect of politics and how it affects people. Not preaching at you, just observing with you." The chorus carries the themes of hysteria and not knowing what to think or aspire to be. I also really like the wordplay in the chorus, as alienation could also be interpreted as alien nation to show how America transformed following 9/11. The second verse then hits us with the line,
"Well, maybe I'm the faggot America. I'm not a part of a redneck agenda."
The contrast between those two lines I find quite interesting. It's okay for him to say that. He's bisexual. Get over it. Now, the N-word, on the other hand, as to me, it almost comes across as someone going, yeah, you know what, I am that, because you don't speak for me. It's like reclaiming it and embracing it, which furthers the song's message in a really clever way. It should also be noted that starting in 2019, Armstrong changed the line to, "I'm not part of a MAGA agenda," during live performances. The most noteworthy, and the one that caused the biggest fuss, was during their 2023 New Year's Rockin' Eve performance. Anyway, the drums in the bridge with Billy's muffled vocals are probably my favorite part. It's like the song is almost moving in slow motion. During live versions, this is when Billy will usually get the crowd to chant "hey" on time with the song, which only makes the song dropping right back into the chorus that much more satisfying. This was the lead single for the album. Alongside it was a music video directed by Samuel Bayer, who directed all the videos for the album and Bullet in a Bible. In it, the band is shown playing in front of a green striped 48-star American flag in some warehouse. However, something I noticed is that when they're all shown together, they're each moving at different speeds. I don't know if this is supposed to symbolize something, but ever since I noticed it, it's really pissed me off for whatever reason. During the bridge, the green goo drains from the flag and a bunch of it comes gushing out of the speakers, which just looks f***ing awesome. Also, this song got a Weird Al parody, which is how you know you've made it. American Idiot may be the first song on the album, but Jesus of Suburbia is where the narrative really starts. The titular character is the protagonist and POV character of the album. The song is broken up into 5 distinct segments, each representing a moment in Jesus' life or psyche that led him to leave home at the end of the song. Armstrong said, quote, "It broke every rule people thought Green Day were supposed to be. Lyrically, it's everything about my past, but at the same time, written on the outside as well. That song is like purging everything, throwing it out." The first movement of the song is titled, well, Jesus of Suburbia, which introduces the character with the iconic opening line,
"I'm the son of Rachel Love, the Jesus of Suburbia."
Not only summing up who the character is supposed to be, but also serving as a foil to the opening line of American Idiot. The first movement of the song is primarily focused on setting up the character for the rest of the album, showing him as a rebellious teenager with an allegiance to no one but himself, hopped up on drugs, denial, and feeling disillusioned with where he lives and the idea of the American dream. Something else I want to compliment is the drum fills towards the end of this part in between the bass and guitar riffs. While part 1 discusses Jesus' lifestyle, part 2's City of the Damned shows us the town of Jingletown, California, where he lives. The only place for him and others like him to hang out is by the local 7-Eleven, but even then, as expressed in the line,
"It says home is where your heart is, but what a shame, 'cause everyone's heart doesn't beat the same. It's beating out of time."
he feels like he still doesn't belong. After entering the bathroom at the convenience store, he reads the graffiti sprawled across its walls, written by him or others.
"It didn't say much, but it only confirmed that the center of the earth is the end of the world."
This only further cements to Jesus that this place isn't a home, but a cage, one that he needs to escape to feel fulfilled. Eventually, this boils over in the scream of apathy that is part 3, "I Don't Care," which begins with the chant of,
"I don't care if you don't, I don't care if you don't, I don't care if you don't care."
The entirety of this movement of the song is an explosion of frustration at the current state of things, taking aim at the words and actions of others.
"Everyone's so full of shit, born and raised by hypocrites,
And the Iraq War.
from Anaheim to the Middle East."
It's also implied that there are followers of Jesus of Suburbia, but I personally think that it's intended to be metaphorical. The song then breaks into the fourth movement, Dearly Beloved. Compared to the other parts, this one's more of a reprieve, with Mike's bass taking center stage, and even acoustic guitars accenting most of the segment. However, it doesn't slow down or anything, as it keeps up a heart-thumping drum beat by Trey throughout. In it, the Jesus of Suburbia begins questioning if he's going crazy and if he's normal to have these thoughts. But he still feels victimized. And before you know it, the song snaps right back into punk rock with part 5, Tales of Another Broken Home. At this point, Jesus has had enough of his fractured home, his dead-end town, and everything else in his life, so he leaves it all behind. This entire arc of the song can almost be taken as a manifesto of sorts, Jesus laying out why he's leaving. He feels no shame in leaving because he was simply existing, not living. He got nothing out of it, and is now deciding to head for the big city to try and make something out of his life. As a side note, this section is just killer line after killer line. I know sometimes Billy Joe Armstrong can be quite literal in his writing, but the way it's expressed and coupled with the momentous instrumentation make it feel so much more impactful. Jesus of Suburbia was the 5th and final single from American Idiot, released first in the UK in October and the US in November 2005. The accompanying music video is more akin to a short film, with it loosely following the events of the song. However, the video depicts Jesus' relationship with the character of What's-Her-Name before it occurs in the album's storyline. But I don't let it bother me too much, because this is probably the perfect video for the song. Not only is it compelling to watch on its own, but it also adds to the story within the song. I also appreciate how the footage of the band is incorporated into the video. It's unobtrusive and fits with Jesus' character to be watching Green Day on TV. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention my immense personal attachment to the song. It was basically my theme song in 9th grade. The angst of Jesus of Suburbia takes us into the swing-tempoed bombast of Holiday. A song, Armstrong said,
This song is not anti-American, it's anti-war.
Not only is it a protest song in isolation, in the context of the narrative, it's about the first few days of Jesus of Suburbia living it up in the big city. He's cut himself off from the establishment and is discovering who he is through rebellion.
I beg to dream and differ from the hollow lies. This is the dawning of the rest of our lives on holiday.
Divorced from the narrative, the chorus further emphasizes a sense of nonconformity and takes aim at those who choose not to take any initiative, thus the title of the song. While this song is about Iraq, I personally think that this song has had a lot of staying power as a protest song, due in part to it never bringing the conflict or George Bush up directly. It's not talking down to the listener. The line,
Another protester has crossed the line to find the money's on the other side.
to me could mean that the only money to be found is in supporting the war and ultimately succumbing to the system. Meanwhile, the other half of the second verse touches on soldiers who died unable to quote-unquote speak freely, which connects back to the first verse comparison to trained dogs, and how their howls are out of key. The refrain of,
"The representative from California has the floor,"
is notable, but not for the reason you may think. Green Day are from California, but whenever they perform this song live anywhere other than California, Billy Joe will change the line to be wherever it is they're playing. Another bit of note is,
"Pulverize the Eiffel Towers who criticize your government,"
which not only evokes 9/11, but also might allude to the fact that France was actually against the invasion of Iraq. Y'all remember Freedom Fries? 'Cause I sure don't. As the song draws to a close, it ends on a low note that rings out before the guitars of the following track, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, fade in. I'll touch on that track in a second, but not before I talk about the music video for Holiday. Released alongside the third single, the video shows Green Day riding around the streets of Las Vegas in a convertible being a safety hazard, Jesus Christ, with footage of the band in a bar with several copies of themselves portraying many different caricatures. Billy then sings the bridge while a bunch of girls are dancing in the background, with the video ending as their car breaks down, which segues into the video for Boulevard of Broken Dreams. Speaking of which, this song picks up right where Holiday left off. It's the come down after the high of that song, which is intended to mirror Jesus of Suburbia's mental state once the initial excitement wears off and the depression sets in. Right from the onset, the lines,
I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. Don't know where it goes, but it's home to me and I walk alone.
paints the picture that there's nobody around to help him. Because he chose to leave everything behind, he left the relative safety of the suburbs too, and is now surrounded by strangers in a strange environment. Something I find quite notable about this song, and something I only realized while researching, is that the song isn't a cry for help to be saved from loneliness. Rather, it still presents the harsh reality, but it's more so succumbing to it. Sure, it might occasionally call out to someone to come along and save him, such as in the lines,
Sometimes I wish someone up there will find me.
which also foreshadows later events. But on the whole, he's accepting the loneliness and isn't taking any active measures to change it. As the song goes on, his sanity begins to wither, as expressed in,
I'm walking down the line that divides me somewhere in my mind, on the borderline of the edge and where I walk alone.
This line also foreshadows events, but more on that when I get there. The outro of the song is notably heavier than the rest, symbolizing a breaking point in Jesus of Suburbia's mind. Initially, the band wanted something different for the outro. Rob Cavallo recalled, quote, originally, the band wanted the outro to be something huge, like the crescendo at the end of the Beatles' A Day in the Life. Then they thought maybe they'd try it with calliopes and circus music and craziness like that. I told them, look, you're a rock band, let's just do it with guitars. So we had Billy plug in and just play the hardest, fastest chords he can. We just told him to push it as far as he could. And then when we mixed it, we just kept telling Chris Lord-Alge to push it. We'd be yelling, push it, push it. Boulevard of Broken Dreams would be the second single released from the album. The song wouldn't just be a massive hit. This is arguably Green Day's biggest song. I feel like it's become the de facto Green Day song in pop culture in many ways. It peaked at number 2 on the Hot 100, and the music video has nearly 1 billion views on YouTube at the time of writing. That's how massive a song it was. Speaking of the video, the music video continues the events of Holidays, with the two being shot back to back. In it, Green Day are walking alone. Wow, I never could have seen that coming. But while the band were only walking on treadmills, the background was not a green screen. Instead, the footage behind them was displayed using old school projectors. The vulture was real, by the way. As the depression and isolation gets to Jesus of Suburbia, his mental state goes from bad to worse, in the song Are We the Waiting. This song continues the dour tone of the previous, but it's a lot more spatial, if that makes any sense. Especially with the drum pattern from Trey, it really complements the isolated feel of the song. In it, the Jesus of Suburbia has fully realized that life in the city wasn't all he dreamed it would be. But now that he's in it, he's left adrift in the streets with no identity, no purpose, no nothing.
This dirty town is burning down in my dreams. Lost and found, city bound in my dreams.
The chant of a chorus, meanwhile,
Are we are the waiting.
sees our main character struggling with this uncertainty. Coupled with the refrain of,
And screaming.
implies that he feels trapped in both the city as well as his mind and seeks belonging. With this in mind, he comes to the conclusion that who he thought he is, the identity that he had, isn't who he needs to be in order to fully fit in his new environment.
The Jesus of Suburbia is a lie.
And with that, the song following a repeated chorus snaps suddenly into punk rock with St. Jimmy. Now there is some debate as to whether or not the character of St. Jimmy is a separate entity, or if he's just a persona that Jesus of Suburbia adopts, or if he's a figment of his imagination. When asked about this, Armstrong said, quote, I think the original thought was that it's kind of the same person. It could be two different people, I don't know. I love St. Jimmy, he's pretty cool, he's pretty sexy. It's sort of part of a split personality that I think a lot of people have. They sort of get disconnected from themselves a little bit and maybe follow a self-destructive path. And I think St. Jimmy sort of symbolizes that. I've always thought that St. Jimmy was a persona taken on by Jesus of Suburbia after his sanity breaks, but I wouldn't say you're wrong for interpreting it differently. The persona embodies all the traits Jesus of Suburbia wished he was, and what he believes true rebellion looks like. No longer is he the son of rage and love, now he's succumbed to the rage within him, turning to violence and self-destruction as a shield. As the chorus states,
I'm the pain transcend of the denial, with an angel face and a taste for suicidal.
Also, I've always been a big fan of the line,
I am the son of a bitch and Edgar Allan Poe.
mainly because I think it's funny, but also because a lot of the themes in Edgar Allan Poe's work are in some way present in American Idiot. Billy Joe remarked about the song, quote, when you crack that song, that's a scary guy. It's like you're looking at your reflection in the mirror and you're holding a gun right to your face. If you're talking about those kinds of things in a song, then there's something that's definitely wrong with you. There's something behind it. Jimmy eventually falls further down the path of self-destruction and drug abuse and give me Novocaine. In surrendering to his new alter ego, Jimmy turns to drugs as a way to numb the pain, which is what the name of the song is alluding to. Something I quite enjoy is the contrast between the verses and the chorus. The verses are more laid back, even having a slide guitar in the second verse. Meanwhile, the choruses are this explosion characterized by the inclusion of electric guitar. However, the bridge to me seems to imply that the two emotions are being mixed together, particularly the outstanding guitar solo. While the first verse of the song touches on why Jimmy is turning to drugs, I feel the second always hinted at a darker undertone to this. The line,
Jimmy says it's better than air,
has always stuck out to me and makes me think that he's trying to end his own life via an overdose, and the lyrics are his side note. If this is a case, it reframes the chorus,
drain the pressure from the swelling. The sensation's overwhelming. Give me a long kiss goodnight and everything'll be alright. Tell me that I won't feel a thing. So give me Novocaine.
in a really dark way. Not just describing the process or his motive, he's expressing that he wants to die. But just as the song gets comfortable, the drum pattern bookending things making the listener think that the track will come to an end, it suddenly smash cuts into the ever-energetic She's a Rebel, which introduces us to the love interest of the story, What's-Her-Name, a free-spirited embodiment of true rebellion. The character of What's-Her-Name was in many ways inspired by Amanda, an ex-girlfriend of Armstrong's, the same one who inspired Good Riddance, She, and others. Right from the onset, Jimmy is infatuated by her, describing her as both a saint and dangerous. She is the rebel Jimmy so desperately wishes he could be, described in the line,
She's a symbol of resistance, and she's holding on my heart like a hand grenade.
That last bit was actually added in later as a reference to the cover. Meanwhile, the second verse sees Jimmy creating this idea of who he thinks What's-Her-Name is, due to each line starting with is she rather than she's. But regardless of where his mind is racing to, there is no doubt that What's-Her-Name entering Jimmy's life rejuvenated the rebellious spirit that he originally had upon entering the city.
She sings a revolution, the dawning of our lives. She brings this liberation that I just can't define. Well, nothing comes to mind.
Which calls back to Holiday. The track concludes with the main hook repeated over and over, but what I'd like to draw attention to is the Broadway rendition of this track, as it combines She's a Rebel with Last of the American Girls from 21st Century Breakdown, as well as St. Jimmy at the very end. Extraordinary Girl is the song on the album that probably gets the most hate, which, yeah, this is probably the weakest track on American Idiot. It's still amazing, but one song has to be the weakest, and this is it. This one starts with bongos and a Middle Eastern sounding intro, but after 30 seconds we're brought back to the core sound. I really dig the little trill yell thing Armstrong does at the start. It just complements the tone so well. Lyrically, this one further explores the relationship between Jimmy and What's-Her-Name. But while St. Jimmy is just a persona Jesus of Suburbia is putting on, What's-Her-Name isn't. It's who she really is at her core, leading to tension between the two. With the song contrasting the two in the opening verse,
She's an extraordinary girl in an ordinary world, and she can't seem to get away. He lacks the courage in his mind, like a child left behind, like a pet left in the rain.
But as the song draws to a close, we hear static in the background. But then a woman's voice breaks through and we hear,
Nobody liked you, everyone left you, they're all out without you, having fun.
What's-Her-Name has left Jimmy, bringing us into Letterbomb. The opening vocals were sung by Kathleen Hanna of Bikini Kill, which are implied to be her directly talking to Jimmy. Meanwhile, the bulk of the song is meant to be the letter left by What's-Her-Name after she dumped him, which simultaneously represents a breaking point in Jimmy's psyche. The letter is a pointed f*** you to Jimmy, both the persona and Jesus of Suburbia, pointing out how much of a fraud he is. Despite hyping himself up to be this savior figure, he has amounted to nothing other than self-pity.
The dummy failed the crash test, collecting unemployment checks. Got flunky only along for the ride.
I also liked the little callback to Jesus of Suburbia, the song, in the lines,
What's in love is now and dead on your birth certificate.
since that song had.
To fall in love and fall in debt.
It's used as a way to show how he didn't practice what he preached. The chorus is twofold in its meaning.
It's not over till you're underground. It's not all before it's too late. This city's burning. It's not my burden. It's not all before it's too late.
Not only is What's-Her-Name telling Jimmy that his problems are nobody's fault but his, it could also be Jimmy acknowledging these problems and initiating change, which may be suggested by the song's use of ignition imagery and allusions to running away. I'm particularly fond of the
I don't look back.
right after the scream. Coupled with the instrumental, it adds to the urgency that the song embodies. It really hammers home the feeling that Jesus needs to escape from the city. But the ultimate destruction of who he is comes in the lines,
You know that Jesus is superior. The Saint Jimmy is a thing made of your father's rage and your mother's love. Made me the idiot America.
This line could be interpreted as coming from What's-Her-Name, claiming that these personas are one and the same, which causes Jimmy's outlook on things to come crashing down. Right from the start, he was dead set on not becoming what he perceived to be as an American idiot, but he couldn't be the Jesus of Suburbia, and his life in the city as St. Jimmy proved to not be what he wanted. His whole sense of identity is shattered before his eyes, and has become the indifferent, apathetic American he raged against. He truly has nothing left in the city. Before we discuss Jesus of Suburbia's abandonment of the city, we need to take a slight detour to the song most detached from the album's narrative, Wake Me Up When September Ends. While many have tried to fit this song into the story, to me it serves as an intermission of sorts, as this song touches on the death of Billy Joe's father when he was 10 years old on September 1st, with the title coming from something he said to his mother after locking the door to his room after the funeral. Armstrong avoided writing about this subject for as long as he could, with the track originally being planned for Shenanigans. But once he was finally ready, it was as if a weight had been lifted.
Summer has come and passed. The innocent can never last. Wake me up when September ends.
The opening line expresses how Armstrong feels seasonal grief surrounding the death of his father, with the line,
Like my father's come to pass, 7 years has gone so fast.
seeing him take the perspective of his 17-year-old self, around the time he formed the band that became Green Day. Meanwhile, the chorus touches on the depression Armstrong feels during this time of year, while also accepting the pain and how these experiences got him to where he is now. While the first half of verse 2 is a reprise of the first, the song explodes when Armstrong sings the title. The guitar solo is my absolute favorite part of the song. It elevates the emotion to a whole new level and is one hell of a payoff. The last verse switches the first verse's line to
20 years has gone so fast.
which is Armstrong looking back at things from the perspective of where he was at the time of writing, accepting that the pain of the past is still a part of him. However, upon the release of the single on June 13th, 2005, the meaning of the song was lost in a sense on many listeners, with its subject matter of grief and loss extending to the lingering pains of 9/11 and later the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. These days, the song has proved to be fertile meme ground, as at the start and end of September, people will often post online about how we need to wake up the guy from Green Day. While many listeners are aware of the context behind the song and remain respectful, it hasn't stopped Armstrong from acknowledging the annual joke, with him stating in 2016, quote, I don't know, have fun, get a life at the same time. I'm gonna write a song, it's called Shut the F Up When October Comes. The joke was even referenced in a promo video released on October 1st to announce the then upcoming lead single from Saviors, The American Dream Is Killing Me. The music video, I'm not a big fan of the music video, I'm not gonna lie. It depicts a young couple torn apart by the boyfriend joining the military and being deployed to Iraq, showing the human cost of war and how it impacts those around us. I understand the importance of the message, especially at the time, but to me, it's always given me strong after-school special energy. Also, I swear I remember the main guy getting gunned down and dying, but that never happens in the video. Not a horrible video, just not my favorite. After that brief break, we're brought into the climax of the album, Homecoming, the longest song in Green Day's discography at a staggering 9 minutes and 18 seconds, and only one to feature all three members on lead vocals. This song, much like Jesus of Suburbia, is broken into 5 movements. The first being the death of St. Jimmy, which covers... is it not obvious? The song's opening lines evokes a phone call, as I've always interpreted it as being either Jesus of Suburbia trying to reach out to someone, or vice versa. I think it has to do with the vocal effect used and the line,
Please call me only if you are coming home.
but once it ends, we then get sounds of marching, which nicely segues into the main riff and drum beat of this part of the song. We catch up with Jimmy in the streets, dejected and disillusioned with the city. His hopes, his dreams, hell, even the drugs are all gone. The only thing left tying him to this city is the St. Jimmy persona, but he even begins questioning if he needs this fictitious version of himself anymore, stating plainly that,
In the crowd of pain, St. Jimmy comes without any shame. He says we're fucked up but we're not the same, and mom and dad are the ones you can blame.
with this in mind, Jesus of Suburbia ultimately kills off the St. Jimmy part of himself, reverting back to who he was before he entered the city. The song then flashes forward sometime in the second movement, East 12th Street, named after the police station Armstrong was taken to after his DUI. Here, Jesus has gotten himself clean and a menial job pushing papers, suffering from anxiety and reminiscing about the life he left behind. I find this oddly ironic in a way. He wishes he could return to his former life, but it was that lifestyle that drove him to where he is. It kind of shows that even if he relapsed back into it, he'd probably end up back where he is. We're then taken into the third part, Nobody Likes You, sung entirely by Mike Dirnt. It sees Jesus of Suburbia still plagued by thoughts of what's-her-name. In a hyper-caffeinated state of delirium, he recalls what what's-her-name said or wrote to him once she left.
Nobody likes you. Everyone left you. Where'd you go without you? Having fun.
Underscored by the repeated,
Where'd you go?
it may imply that Jesus still misses her, but what I think the reprise of this line means is that he's reclaiming it in a sense. He's saying that she wasn't wrong to say that, and he's embracing it. But as he does, the song transitions back to a more quick-tempoed sound with part 4, Rock and Roll Girlfriend, with the drums reprising the pattern in the title track. It's not the only callback to that song, as during this segment you can clearly hear Mike yell,
To the 22 days to get out of my case.
Speaking of the drums, this segment is sung by Trey Cool, which takes the perspective of a letter sent to Jesus from someone he met while on the streets, who is still living the punk rock lifestyle, who in the booklet for the album is named Toonie, which is basically just him stating that he's still living life as a rebel. This could serve as a reminder to who Jesus of Suburbia used to be, but the line,
To get out of my case. Out of my case. Off of my case.
to me always seemed to imply that Jesus is still in touch with him and has been lamenting about not just his grievances with day-to-day life, but how he ended up finding that this life only led to self-destruction. After reading this note, Jesus decides the only thing left for him to do is head back home. As detailed in the fifth and final movement, we're coming home again. He makes the trek back to the suburbia he left behind, coming to the realization that running away ultimately was meaningless now that he's returning to the environment he wanted to escape from.
The time has come and it's going nowhere. Nobody ever said the life was fair now.
He walks by the 7-Eleven that started his downward spiral, and the song transitions into the anthemic shout of
Home. We're coming home again.
He embraces that he's returning to Jingletown, the neighborhood he lives in, by addressing it as his home. His home isn't the city that burned him. It's where he started out. Sure, his heart is in that desolate underbelly, but as he himself stated, everyone's heart doesn't beat the same. I'd also like to mention the yelled parts by Trey Cool. I've always loved it. I mean, who hasn't wanted to just scream and let out all your pent-up rage like that? But as the song draws to a close, we get the final reclamation of the Nobody Likes You letter. He's not exactly at peace. I don't think Jesus of Suburbia ever truly is at any point in the album, but he's back to where he began. We then move into the final track, What's Her Name? My favorite song on the album. Not just for its lyrical content or how its instrumental complements the intended emotion, but for what it represents. The lyrics are about Jesus of Suburbia reflecting on his relationship with What's-Her-Name. However, the song is written in a way that allows it to stand on its own. It lets the listener insert themselves into the song, as who hasn't reminisced over love lost or even non-romantic relationships that have come to an end. In Jesus of Suburbia's case, he has made a point to scrub clean all memory of her, to the point where her name eludes him. But despite all this, he's still reminded of her, and by proxy, how their lives ended up to be so drastically different.
I made a point to burn all of the photographs. She went away and then I took a different path. I remember the face, but I can't recall the name. Now I wonder how what's her name has been.
The way the chorus is sung the second time around adds to the emotional longing that permeates all throughout this track, especially when underscored by the little guitar strums. My absolute favorite part of it is the juxtaposition of the choir picked guitar with all the instruments and then back again, before the song swells into a hard and heavy-hitting finale, with the bridge especially echoing how he's still haunted by these thoughts of her, even if he knows this line of thinking gets him nowhere.
The regrets are useless in my mind. She's in my head, I must confess.
However, the part of the song that I feel sums up not just the entire point of the song, but the album as a whole, is the lines What's Her Name goes out on.
And in the darkest nights, if my memory serves me right, I'll never turn back time. Forgetting you, but not the time.
How did I only now just realize that he rhymed time with time? Regardless, those lines to me indicate that Jesus of Suburbia is okay with letting the past be the past and leaving What's-Her-Name behind with it. He lived through it, learned from it, and must move forward, forgetting her but not the time he spent in the city. I'll get back to how this song ties together the narrative when I get to my conclusion, as there's a few more things I want to mention, such as how this song got a music video, but it was never released. And to be honest, that was for the better, because I don't think this can even be called a music video. Because if this counts as a music video, then like 90% of TikTok also counts. It's just a girl dressed as What's-Her-Name sort of lip-syncing to the lyrics, dancing and moving kind of sexily. Other than the half-assed lip-syncing, this video has literally nothing to do with the track. On a personal note, before I listened to Jar, this was my favorite Green Day song. It's still up there, but my attachment to it has evolved over the years. Even from the start, the meaning of it has always hit me. But as time has gone on and people have exited my life, I see myself in the song now more than ever. Before I wrap up, I gotta talk about the bonus tracks. Too Much Too Soon, Shoplifter, and Governator were all released as B-sides in Europe and on the American Idiot single, and later on the deluxe edition of the album on iTunes alongside the Jesus of Suburbia music video. Too Much Too Soon was initially intended to be on Cigarettes and Valentines and is actually pretty good. Shoplifter is decent and reminds me of Warning. Governator is entirely sung by Mike and makes reference to Arnold Schwarzenegger's tenure as governor of California. Fortunately for the rest of us, Australia didn't get a ton of extra bonus tracks like they did with Nimrod. Japan, on the other hand, yeah, they're still pissing me off. Over there, they got the song Favorite Son. Probably my favorite of the bonus tracks. I don't know, they're all great in their own ways. I also can't be too mad at Japan, as even before the box set, it wasn't some rare track or anything. It appeared as a 21 Guns B-side in 2009, as well as on the second Rock Against Bush compilation. I love his expression on the cover. He's like, "Oh Jesus, those darn kids and their rock and roll music." I already mentioned When It's Time when talking about the musical, but Cigarettes and Valentine's title track was played live in 2011, and a recording of that performance was released on the live album Awesome as F***. Circling back to the end of the album, I find the way it ties everything together to be quite significant. In the end, Jesus is in the same spot as he was at the start of the album. The only major difference is now his dreams of who he wanted to be were destroyed before his eyes. He doesn't achieve what the band sought out to critique. Instead, his actions, or lack thereof, led him to becoming the very thing he didn't want to be. So, are Green Day implying that rebelling against what society deems the norm isn't worth it? No, at least I don't think so. Sure, Jimmy might have wound up rebelling for nothing, but I think that What's-Her-Name not only serves as a foil to his persona of rebellion, but represents that it can only be achieved if you fully commit. It's not something that can be faked. Billy Joe Armstrong remarked in VH1 Storytellers, quote, I think the true hero of this whole record is what's-her-name. She's a person who never really wanes. She never really falls from grace. She's the one that kind of stuck to her beliefs and left all the bullshit behind. We can lash out all we want against society, but at the end of it all, we have to grow up eventually, only to look back on those hopeful days with rose-tinted glasses. The narrative of American Idiot is quite loose, all things considered, left mainly up to interpretation. But the reflection of the fears and anxieties felt by countless people is still heard to this very day. Even if it's told through the lens of a coming-of-age story, American Idiot has still managed to resonate with generations of individuals feeling just as trapped and powerless as the protagonist of the album. If I had to sum it up, I'd say that's its true legacy, and why it remains such an important album. Well, that about covers it. My apologies for making you all wait so long, but I hope this absolute monster of a deep dive made up for it. I've never made a video this comprehensive about an album, and I don't foresee videos this massive being the norm going forward, but I felt like American Idiot was deserving of it, not only because it's my favorite album of all time, but the story, both in and out of the album, was something that I felt would benefit from a longer runtime. If y'all enjoyed the video, feel free to give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Also, if you're interested, there is an official Changing the Subject Discord server. I've never really talked about it too much in the past, but it exists. Hopefully the link will be in the description. I had to resist calling it the doobly-doo. If it's not in the description, it'll be in the channel, so don't worry. There you can talk to other... I didn't time that. Someone just pinged me while I was talking about the Discord server. There you can talk to other people as you do on Discord. But also you can read G's notes, which are handwritten notes by yours truly about whatever I've been thinking about. There's really no theming to them other than the fact that they kind of exist in the liminal space between Rivers Cuomo's Pinkerton Diaries and Chuck Lorre's Vanity Cards. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, hop on over. But that about does it for now. And until next time, see you around.